What up, guys? It's Dom, and welcome back to another movie review. Today we're going over a movie that was recommended to me by my lovely girlfriend. We're going over 1408. 1408, released in 2007, directed by Michael Hafstrom, a man who specializes in debunking paranormal occurrences, checks into the fabled room 1408 in the Dolphin Hotel. Soon after settling in, he confronts genuine terror. Let's get right into the 10 essential aspects of a movie. The first essential aspect is plot. So the plot of this movie was very interesting, but it also is very confusing. Now, it was intended, the goal of their movie was to confuse the viewer and make them think if something is real or fake and try to decipher that. And that's fine. It worked for the most part, but there were some scenes that just I could not follow along at all with the plot. I did not know what was happening. I wish they just kind of cleaned it up a little bit. That's just one thing that bothered me. But I am glad that throughout most of the movie, the setting was just room 1408. They nailed the title. The whole movie is within that room, and then the setting's changing within the room. So I think that was cool. That definitely added to the plot, and they definitely nailed the ending. It was the best way they could have ended that movie, and overall satisfied with the plot. Just some confusion that I wish was cleared up. The second essential aspect is attraction. Is the movie entertaining? Yes and no. I mean, it definitely was engaging. I wanted to figure out what was real, what was fake. I wanted to figure out what was going to happen after he got out of the room and if he got out of the room. So that was good to have. I do wish it was a bit scarier since this is a horror thriller and it was really just a soft thriller, I'd say. It was good and it did what it needed to do to an extent. I just wish it was kind of scarier. And the whole first part of the movie was just really dull. I don't know why they put so much time into that part. I feel like if they made the whole movie his experience in room 1408, it would have ended up being a better film. The third essential aspect is theme. Sometimes the story is not worth the experience. You should not be going into a room that literally like 57 people have died in just to write a chapter of a book. I think you should have stayed at that, honestly. Come up with something else to write about. The fourth essential aspect is dialogue. The dialogue between characters wasn't anything too special. Samuel L. Jackson did do a good job with his dialogue for the small portion he was in. But the main piece of dialogue that was very interesting was when Mike was talking to his recorder throughout the movie and kind of overviewing his whole experience and what's going on around him. And then him listening it back, seeing the subtle differences in what we heard him say and what the tape recorder actually caught was really cool. That was a really cool piece of dialogue. I'm glad they put that in there. The fifth essential aspect is acting. So the acting in this movie was actually really good. Samuel L. Jackson did a decent job at being the manager. He was basically the second main character, I would say, in this movie. He was only in a small portion, and he did a good job with the scenes he was in. However, John Cusack, who played Mike, he was the star. He was the one that was on the screen for 99.9% of the movie. It was his story, and they did a great job. His way of portraying emotion was awesome in this movie. You could feel each scene. Instead of pulling you out, he honestly pulled you into the movie. You wanted to keep seeing him on screen. You wanted to know how he was going to react to the next things that were happening. So overall, I think they did a great choice with choosing John Cusack for that role. I would not be able to see anyone else playing him. The sixth essential aspect is cinematography. So the main emotion this movie was supposed to convey is fear, since it is a horror thriller. And I will say they did a good job with the thriller part. There was some thrilling scenes. However, they really were lackluster with the horror. It wasn't really a scary movie. If anything, it made me feel uneasy. Like there were some parts where I was like, if I'm in that situation, I'm scared. But watching it isn't really scary. And when they made the big changes to the room, those looked really cool. I'm not going to spoil it because they are really cool. I suggest you go watch it for yourselves. But they changed the entire room around. Let's say he walked into a different room. Suddenly when he goes back into the other room, it's a completely different room. They did that throughout the whole movie, and that was really cool. And then there was subtle changes that happened. Something being misplaced, a slightly crooked picture frame where you can tell there's a presence in the room, but you'd never see it. So that was really cool, and that part did make me feel uneasy. So I think with the cinematography, they did a pretty good job. I just wish there was more fear-inducing scenes. The seventh essential aspect is editing. So 1408 is 1 hour and 44 minutes long, and for the most part, it is paced really well. The ending was wrapped up nicely. However, I feel like it could have been shorter. I feel like the beginning was unnecessarily long. They did not need to go into that much depth with the character. They could have just done a quick summary to make you start having a connection with this character that will eventually evolve through the story, but they did not need to go in such depths. I feel like they were just dragging it out. So other than that beginning part, I feel like the movie was paced decently well, and it just probably should be a little shorter. The eighth essential aspect is soundtrack. I think they did a really good job picking the soundtrack for this movie. It fit perfectly. It was very eerie, and the scenes where he started to think that there could be something with him, that he feels a presence, but he doesn't really know for sure. The soundtrack behind that really made me feel that way too. Like, they chose a perfect soundtrack. So overall, great job with that. The ninth essential aspect is directing. So Michael Hafstrom is the director of this movie, and it was his job to take these previous 8 essential aspects, put them together to make a movie that's worth watching. And honestly, I think he did a good job. This movie is 100% worth watching. I feel like he needs to work on that pacing. He needs to work on kind of making it scarier, since it is supposed to be a horror movie. But overall, the story made sense. The story flowed. Other than the purposeful, confusing parts, I think he did a pretty good job. And he has directed 5 previous movies to this one, and they were Vendetta, Days Like This, Evil, Drowning Ghost, and Derailed. So I've never watched any of those movies, so I wouldn't be able to say with my own experience. But from what I saw from the reviews, only really one was rated highly. The rest were pretty low. So he definitely did improve based on that. And if I think if he continues with future movies, he just needs to do as well of a job as in this movie with coming up with an interesting premise. Because the premise was definitely the best part of the movie. It was really interesting. It made me want to watch the movie once I knew what it was. So as long as he keeps doing that with future movies, I feel like he'll do a pretty good job. And the 10th essential aspect is time. As of the recording of this video, this movie is 17 years old, and it isn't talked about at all. I feel like no one really knows about this movie too much compared to other movies. And it is a good thriller, so it's unfortunate that it's not really talked about. So it does not stand the test of time, but personally, I feel like it should be given a chance. Now, the reviews. The reviews for this movie were higher than I thought it was going to be given, which surprised me. So Rotten Tomatoes critics gave it an 80%, Rotten Tomatoes audience gave it a 61%, and IMDb gave it a 69%. And honestly, I'm surprised critics rated it so high, since it's not really a talked about movie. I didn't think it was going to be given the credit that it deserves. But I would personally put it in between Rotten Tomatoes critics and IMDb. I think it belongs in the low 70s personally, because it definitely has a lot of stuff it needs to work out. But it is a good watch. I'll definitely rewatch it. I think the theme and the premise of it is by itself interesting enough to really want you to watch it again. So I think they did a pretty good job. It definitely has some kinks that it needs to work out, but it's definitely not a bomb. And finally, the rankings. Where will 1408 rank in its year, decade, and all time? Let's find out. In 2007, it is the only movie that I have reviewed so far, so it will take that first position. Now, in the 2000s, it will take third in between X2 and X-Men. Now, I didn't really know where I wanted to put it here. I didn't know if I wanted to put it above both X-Men or below both X-Men. I decided that I think it should go right in the middle, because I feel like all 3 of these movies are pretty close. They all have their things that they need to work on, but they are still good movies. So I just think it belongs right in the middle. I think it has a more interesting premise than X-Men did. Yes, X-Men was still a really good movie. I just think this one also is. And also with X2, I just think it's just better put together. There isn't as many confusing aspects that I don't know really what's going on. So I just think X2 is better than 1408, but 1408 is better than X-Men. And for all time, it's going to be 7th, and it's going to be the same situation. It's going to be right below X2 and above X-Men. That's just happened to be how it got placed in that list. So I'm not really going to cover it again. So that's all I have for 1408. If you guys enjoyed this review, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and make sure to comment what movie you want me to see next. Hope you guys have a great day. Peace out.